You know what's fascinating? Studies show that people who lose arguments gracefully are actually rated as more persuasive and trustworthy than those who aggressively win debates. Let's dive into this counterintuitive wisdom about the art of losing arguments to build deeper connections.
That's such an interesting finding. It really challenges our natural competitive instincts, doesn't it?
Well, it connects to this ancient rhetorical device called a polemic, traditionally used as a powerful argumentative tool. But here's the twist. Historical records show religious leaders actually used it to build bridges rather than walls. The Book of Wisdom, for example, is entirely structured as a polemic, but one aimed at fostering understanding rather than division.
So how exactly does something designed for argument become a tool for connection?
Think of it like this. Imagine you're wielding a sword, but instead of using it for combat, you're using it to clear away obstacles between people. The early church fathers, especially St. Ambrose of Milan, wrote extensively about using rhetoric not to defeat opponents, but to serve truth and love. You know what's particularly interesting? Historical records show this approach was incredibly effective during times of social upheaval.
That makes me think about how different our current social media debates would look if we approached them this way.
Exactly. And this connects to this fascinating concept mentioned about divine blackness. It's not darkness as in the absence of light, but rather this sacred hiddenness. Like studies in religious psychology show that people who practice anonymous acts of kindness report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction than those who publicize their good deeds.
Well, that's exactly what we need in our current culture of constant validation seeking, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And you know what research has consistently shown? When people feel they're being listened to rather than argued with, they're up to 75% more likely to consider alternative viewpoints. It's like what Pope Leo emphasized about communication being of fundamental importance.
So how do we maintain that balance between standing firm in our convictions while still remaining genuinely open to others?
That's where this concept of perfect charity becomes crucial. Historical examples show that the most effective communicators, like the Desert Fathers, approached every conversation with what they called willing the good of the other. They found that when you remove prejudice and resentment from communication, you create this safe space for authentic dialogue.
You know, that reminds me of recent psychological studies showing how vulnerability actually increases perceived authority rather than diminishing it.
Right! And here's what's fascinating. Medieval texts describe this practice of being a fool for Christ as a deliberate strategy. By choosing to appear less sophisticated, these spiritual leaders actually gained more influence because people felt safe enough to be genuine with them.
Well, that certainly turns our modern understanding of influence on its head.
And get this, contemporary research in conflict resolution shows that groups who practice what they call humble inquiry resolve disputes 60% faster than those using traditional debate techniques. It's like what was mentioned about filial love replacing fear. When people feel secure enough to be wrong, they become more open to being right.
That's such a powerful reframing of what victory really means in our conversations.
You know, studies in organizational psychology have found that teams who practice this kind of sacred foolishness, being willing to look less competent for the sake of learning, consistently outperform groups focused on maintaining expertise. It's like this ancient wisdom about losing arguments is actually the key to winning hearts.
And it seems particularly relevant in our current climate of polarization.
Looking ahead, I think we're going to see more emphasis on these counterintuitive communication strategies. As society becomes more complex and divided, these ancient practices of humble dialogue and willing the good of others might just be our best hope for bridging the gaps between us.
That really brings everything full circle. Sometimes the best way to win is to be willing to lose.
And perhaps that's the most profound insight here, that true victory isn't found in proving ourselves right, but in creating spaces where truth and love can flourish together. The data consistently shows that when we approach arguments this way, everyone wins in the end.